Well, hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday, December 19th, and this is the fourth video that we've done today in regards to the debate that happened yesterday at the UK. And so this is an open forum. If everybody wants to have anything to say, please just raise your hand using the reactions button. I can talk for days about this, but the reason I'm doing this is I want to get everybody else's take on the matter. So uh, appreciate if everyone who's not talking keep on the mute button. But if anybody would like to offer their opinion of what did and what did not happen yesterday at the UK parliamentary debate, the floor is open. So speak now. Everybody's welcome to raise their hand and unmute themselves and chime in. If you have any questions, questions are always welcome. Questions are a valid contribution as well. Go ahead, Mary. You're muted though. Okay, now you're
Um,
good.
no, I'm not.
Go right ahead.
Um, so, if I understand correctly, international governments have a deadline, or has the deadline passed, to acknowledge the World Health Organization's mandates or whatever they've decided for themselves. And if they don't acknowledge them, are they bound by them? Like, what's the ratification of these things?
I will try to answer that for you. It's at the very least, there are two separate pathways, and almost everybody has gotten them confused. And so the general concept, which personally I believe is deeply flawed and is really the root source of the trouble, going all the way back to 1969 when the international health regulations were adopted, the manner in which they were adopted was such that appointed delegates met in July of 1969 in Boston, Massachusetts. They adopted the international health regulations and said, okay, everybody, you've got 9 months. And if nobody objects to it, then 9 months after that, on January 1st, 1971, it became legally binding. So it's the concept of assuming that everybody accepts what these bureaucrats decide, and only if someone speaks up and actively rejects them is it then rejected for that nation. Now, that's backwards from what most people and myself believe is appropriate. Most people want to believe, okay, a bunch of people got together, they made a decision. You should have to come back to each nation. They should proactively ratify, approve, give their consent, whatever word you want to use. That's not how they play this game. So the core of how this operates, in my view, is wrong, but that is the reality of how they're playing this game. So in 2022, amendments were, I feel, illegitimately proposed on May 24th. They were submitted by the UK, the United States, European Union, a handful of other nations, in violation of Article 55, which says you got to do that 4 months in advance so that everybody has a chance to know what they are. Then they proceeded to have a committee vote that was improperly done. That's all been recorded, and I've been talking about that for 18 months. But then they, on the 28th of May, 2022, they put out a document that was given the legal counsel's name, and they said this is an authentic document. And it said down on the bottom that in their eighth meeting on May 28th is when this was adopted. But if you watch that eighth plenary session, they never bothered to get around to voting on it. They just didn't bother. And the entire thing is fraudulent. And so there would have been an 18-month period of time whereby each individual nation could have rejected those fraudulent amendments, but everybody's just playing the game and accepting them as if they're real. And on April 3rd, Cheslori put forth a petition, got 116,000 signatures in the UK, saying we want to have a discussion about this in Parliament, and Parliament should vote on these amendments. Well, the petition committee conveniently scheduled the debate on the 18th of December, which is a little bit after December 1st, which was the deadline. Okay. And they never actually read the petition in the Parliament, and they never actually addressed the issue, which was the people's request that Parliament vote. And Cat Smith, who was the committee member for the petition committee, said very clearly, they don't have any intention of voting. Now, that's one batch of amendments. There's a second batch of amendments that Article 55 states the deadline to submit any amendments for consideration at the next May Assembly has to be submitted 4 months in advance, which would be January 27th. The working group for those amendments has clearly conspired and said that they know that that deadline is there in Article 55. It's very clear, but they have every intention of just ignoring it. And so between the WHO fraudulently claiming to have voted on amendments, the executive branch of the UK government, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, Foreign Ministry, failing to submit it to the UK Parliament to be discussed and voted on. They don't have the right, they're not being asked to accept it, but they should have been given the right to reject it. And the petition being ignored and scheduled after, the deadline, and no mention of the fact that the WHO has every intention of continuing these negotiations all the way up to the last minute and not giving proper time to consider and discuss. Nobody said anything yesterday about any of that. They talked for 2 hours, but they didn't mention any of that. So I hope that helps. I know that's a lot to soak in.
Thank you. So it's in a sense, it's like the cable company saying you have all these, if we're going to increase your fees and we're going to increase your service unless you tell us not to. And if you're not vigilant, all of a sudden your fees go up, and you've got service that you don't want. So the WHO is basically doing things backwards, like you're suggesting, that if you don't object, then it becomes mandatory.
Becomes international law, essentially.
And because of international law.
Right. And
so what can a person do at this point when the powers that be, or the politicians that should be governing this, are not picking up the ball?
There's a multitude of things that can be done. Everybody has a different view of what the proper method is, but the starting point is awareness. And so my fear about what happened last night, and fear is not really the right word because I'm not afraid of things with what's going on. It's a call to action. Okay. It's not what happened yesterday. It's what didn't happen. It's what wasn't said. It's what wasn't raised. And so what's going to happen out there is whatever small group of people did pay attention, they're going to be cutting out little clips from what happened yesterday, and they're going to be talking about what was talked about. But it's difficult to read a document or watch a video and say, well, what was not in that document or what was not in that video? most people are not going to have this conversation. And so sharing, your awareness of what the heck is going on here, nobody's going to do anything if they don't know that there's something that needs to be done. And so step number one is share whatever information you care to share with anybody, raise their awareness, and realize, unfortunately, the vast majority of people are going to sit on their hands and do nothing. But, it takes a small group of people who are dedicated to exposing the truth. There's evidence of fraud. There's evidence of administrative malfeasance. There's evidence of conspiracy to violate international law going forth in the future. You would think that that would be a story. So what's up with the media, and not just the mainstream, forget about them. What's up with the alternative media not reporting on these points? And so whether you reach out to, people in the alternative media or just everybody you possibly can imagine and raise these same questions to anybody that you could possibly imagine, word will spread, because I'm not letting up on this. It will spread. And at some point, we don't need everybody. We'll never get everybody. But at some point, when you observe crimes being committed and you don't say anything, well, bad on you, right? Let me stop talking and open up the floor to anybody else who has anything that they care to say. Hopefully that addressed your questions, I hope. Yeah. Go ahead, Glenn. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, James. Great for organizing so many meetings. You must have been in meetings all day today. After some, you could pretty well pick any time. There were negatives, obviously, in the meeting. I watched the whole thing where basically the compromised politicians on the ruling party started giving their standard excuses about, oh, we promised they'll never encroach on the sovereignty of England or the UK. And the basic, the expected clarification excuses for why this is being done the way it's being done. The positive for me is that although the meeting was later than the 1st of December, which it should have happened in November, I agree 100% with that, is that all those people in that room, especially the people that were speaking about the truth, I saw that the woman who's she was sitting in the audience. I lost her name. She's a British girl. Anyway, the positive thing is that everybody in that room, even the compromised politicians, know now that people know what they're doing. So it's like even though the saying "better late than ever," in this case, I think there's some truth to that, because now those people that took the time to stand up and give their opinion about you never agree to give your sovereignty to a group that is completely out to lunch, completely wrong, was so wrong about COVID-19 that you give your power over health in your country to a group of people who are not elected, rather are appointed and compromised by big pharma and certain donors. So I think the positive we should take away from this is that there's a lot of people in UK now that are going to be awake to what the WHO is trying to do. So that's the positive. But I agree with you, though. We need to go out and bump our contacts in the alternative media. Did you know there was this meeting? Have the meeting. You send everybody a copy of the meeting and say, do you know that this WHO thing is ramping up? It's coming online. If we don't do anything, it's going to come online. So that I was left with better late than never. This is going to be good, and it is in the right direction. Go ahead.
Kudos to Tess Lori, that may be the person you were thinking of.
That's who I was trying to think of, Tess Lori, yes.
She put forth the petition back on April 3rd, and kudos to 116,000 UK citizens and residents who signed the petition. They clearly are aware of what's going on here. All of the discussion of this is over and above what the powers that be would have preferred, in my view. They would have loved to have this just all nice and quietly being negotiated. It would have gone into effect, and a year from now, they would start actually implementing it. And people would be like, when did that happen? Okay. So all of this is a positive, but the the problem with what happened yesterday is they talked for 2 hours about things that are speculation about the future. There's evidence of fraud, administrative malfeasance, and conspiracy to break the rules of international law going forward. And they didn't say a word about that. And, one would think that that would be a story, that some media person would say, hey, did you catch the fact that they didn't talk about these things? That's the hard part, is watching something and realizing what they didn't talk about. And it was all a grand and glorious distraction from things that are really problematic. Now, important stuff for sure, and it's good that it got talked about, but it actually is a decoy. And that's what I'm trying to raise everybody's awareness of. Okay. Important stuff, sounds really vital, got to talk about it. Get some politician to answer the wrong question, and it makes it look like you're doing something when you don't actually mention the things that are orders of magnitude bigger. Okay. And so I'll open up the floor again. I don't want to just be talking here. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Questions are always a valid. I don't know who had their hand first. Between Natalie, Chris, and Nicholas, I'll let you guys decide which order you're going to go in.
Go. Ladies first.
Sorry. Go ahead, Natalie.
Go, Vanessa.
Yeah, I didn't realise that it should have gone through at December the 1st. And I just wanted to say that I did some research on the background, and there was a professor of politics at the University of Leeds who said on the LSE blog, this is the London School of Economics, that just talking about these e-petitions generally, she wrote that for protest petitions, a debate is part of their safety valve role. So she said that protest petitions, the debate is part of their safety valve role. So in other words, these petitions are held as a kind of safety valve, because otherwise people might take things further, they might become disruptive. That's the implication. And I did feel that I really enjoyed watching the speeches yesterday, because I watched it yesterday, the initial speeches, and I was also shocked about the low numbers of members who were actually talking. Yeah. And but by the time I saw the Labour spokesman person, Preet, I think it was Preet Gill, she just didn't seem to even, she was so dismissive that she didn't seem to have even listened to the speeches that the others had made and listened to the points that the others are making. It was just kind of wiped aside. And, she was bringing up all the numbers of deaths and the pandemic, but completely ignoring the facts that had been made about, the specific facts about the tyranny that's coming in. And I think that's why I just felt completely hopeless, that there's nothing we can do. And even when the minister commented and said that they would not do anything that took away British sovereignty, I thought, well, he might not even be in power. And, I would never trust a politician's word anyway. But if Labour's in power, they would probably capitulate immediately. So it's very depressing. I felt worried last night that I don't know what else to do, because we are doing all that we can do. Usually people aren't even expected to get involved in these things. Even politicians, I think, have very limited powers. I've just read the book by Rory Stewart, which is Politics on the Edge. It's a very interesting book. I don't have the same politics as him, but he was in politics for years and found that even though he became minister in various departments, there was very little he could actually achieve. I feel that the system is totally rigged. And it worries me that maybe we're heading towards civil war. Maybe that's the only way that people are going to become heard, once people actually do realise what's coming. It really genuinely worries me. So, yeah.
I have much to say, but let me give the floor to either Chris or Nicholas, who had raised their hand.
Chris?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I would only say that, unfortunately, I didn't see the whole thing, because I went up to London to go into the committee room where it was taking place, and I was told it was full. And when you see how few, I should say, were in the public space, they'd obviously wanted to minimize the number of the public attending, and yet there was so much empty space around the table for would-be MP participants that had not shown up. So it was really a travesty of anything to do with the democratic process. One does wonder, well, it's not a question of wondering. I mean, it's confirmation that really there is a major assault on the democratic process, and I would say on humanity as well. And yet, why are these people so complicit in it? If they don't care for themselves, they have their families, they have their succeeding generations. I mean, it's mind-boggling what is being allowed to happen. It's unbelievable, to be honest. I find it the whole thing from the beginning of the COVID to up to date. It's just an unbelievable series of happenings, really. But something does have to be done about it. I just hope that we can get involved with one of the new parties. And it is feasible, even under the UK election system, if we have some kind of black swan event that really gets people's attention. You could find that the people just turn immediately away from, or the majority of people will turn immediately away from the other parties, because the other so-called mainstream parties, Labour, Conservative and Liberal, I mean, they're all one party effectively.
Yeah.
They don't disagree about anything of substance.
That's
it's
right.
pathetic, absolutely pathetic, the way it's all being done. So I'll say that for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nicholas, go ahead.
Yeah, James, thanks again, mate. It was good having a chat to you a couple of months ago when we had a chat together. Good effort. I mean, tireless man you are.
Yeah. And hats off to you, James. Yeah.
And Chris, I think there are, like, well, look at us. I mean, we're a bunch of people and we're doing something already. I mean, James does an enormous amount. Yeah. I think that things are turning, Natalie. I don't know about whether we'll get to a civil war. I think I'm in Australia, right? I'm in Melbourne. I'm in one of the most punished cities in the world.
Yeah, you are. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, public sentiment is turning. People are starting to understand more and more. And so I'm quite optimistic about it. And I think that we're definitely on the right track. Every little bit we do, like I say, some people say to me, well, what can I do? And I say, well, it doesn't really matter how little you do, as long as you understand, you look at things with a little bit of skepticism. When you're about to make a decision about something, just think about it a little bit more carefully. And next time, instead of queuing up, just think about it and say, well, do I really need to do this? I can vote with my feet. So I think there's a percentage. And we don't need a massive percentage. They need us to comply. They really do need 99.9% of people to make this work. This system that they want to set up, where they have more control, needs enormous, overwhelming compliance. I think we already have the numbers now. I mean, I don't want to be complacent. That's something I don't want to be. I think we already have the numbers now to defeat what they're trying to do. And ultimately, we just have to keep tapping on people's shoulders and saying, hey, just think about this. Remember that. Because trying to dictate anything to anybody doesn't work. That doesn't work. It has to be just planting the seed and letting them think about it. I had a friend of mine who was pushing me to go and get the jab, last year. And now he's probably worse than I am in terms of being cynical and being disagreeable with all this stuff. So, and that was only because I consistently just put an idea in his head. Have a look. Just have a look. Don't believe what I have to say. Just have a look. There's information available. So that's all we need to do. And I think the race and their desperation at the moment, the desperation that I see on their side, the things they're trying to do here, they're trying to introduce the digital ID bill. well, they did just before Christmas. They always do it here. Here it's just before Christmas, just before Easter, just before any public holiday. They introduce a bill, try and keep it quiet. But it's not being done as quietly as they want it to be now. You see, now people are watching. So every time something gets introduced, there's a certain amount of people. And I think it's more than 1% of our population is watching what's going on. That 1% makes a bit of noise. So I don't think, Natalie, I don't think we're going to reach that point. I think we've already reached a point where financial difficulty, because here we have increasing prices like we do everywhere in the world, increasing prices, decreasing incomes, more people unemployed. I think that in itself wakes people up. So we're getting there, but we've all got to continue. And there's things like, for example, there's a new union beginning here in Australia, which has been around for a few years. But this is an actual real union that is trying to help workers, nurses. They specifically began, it's called the Red Union, and specifically began to assist nurses, because here the nurses were being, as they were in most of the world, persecuted for not being injected. So this union sprung up from just really a couple of rich philanthropists sprung up and said, look, we're going to help you. We're going to help you with this problem. So now that union is growing, and it's basically becoming something of a go-to for people who need help. So I'm involved in that. I've been recruited to be part of that union, to oversee their legal department. They're actually setting up their own legal firm. So there is a slow power shift coming, and so don't despair. We just keep going, doing what we do, and at the end of the day, I think that the truth wins. That's what I believe. I think in the end the truth wins. Lies need a lot of maintenance. They need a lot of support. The truth needs only to be looked at, and then that's it from me.
Okay, the floor is open. I'm going to comment on a few of the things that were said, but please, anybody, just raise your hand or unmute yourself if you want to talk. This is for you to have a floor. Part of the section. Oh, Alfredo, go right ahead if you're raising your hand. Please do. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the pond, and I really appreciated the opportunity to see what was going on in the discussions, thinking, well, where are the discussions going on here in the United States? And they're buried somewhere in there. There were some great points that had been made in the debate, if you could really call it a debate, which involved how a number of the member nations can be coerced economically into supporting rather some strong influence by China, for one. And so it's really impossible to go and prevent that kind of coercion from taking place. So it could be comparatively easy for the WHO members to agree to the amendments that may be objectionable to the UK, but those are the rules. And so then the question is, how would the UK be able to go and function? How would the United States be able to go and function when they're being dictated what is to take place when the next planned pandemic comes out? So I look at that and I go and see the need to be able to go and work, at least in our case at the state level, and with our U.S. senators and Congress people, to have them on record for their position. So that way, as more as the truths come out, as more as the truth come out, they will be put into a very uncomfortable situation. And I think it's important for those people to feel very uncomfortable, particularly the people that didn't show up in the, in the meeting where you would have expected to have had people that had a strong influence in either the economics or the health and welfare of the health systems in the UK. And it's, I appreciated Dr. Corey having been mentioned and his book being raised, on ivermectin having been raised. It's really hard to be able to go and have a limited discussion taking place and try and cover the whole set of problems and issues and misinformation that has taken place. But I see some value with that. However short the program was, some of those items had come up, and hopefully people that we go and try and share the discussion that had taken place with can begin to go and say, well, I don't know about this. And the onion might be able to be peeled, or at least have people wanting to learn more and realizing that they have to go outside of the standard social media to be able to go and get that. So I think that, small progress is being made, but it's going to take a lot longer. A thing that bothered me from the time that COVID came out was Alexander Solzhenitsyn's warning to the West that took place in 1975-76, where he went to the UK, he went to the United States and said, this can befall upon you. But even he couldn't expect how many more resources our government has, and social media and the pharmaceutical complex, to be so fully integrated with social media to be able to go and create this newly defined and interpreted only from their perspective of misinformation. So, and unquestionably, we are working with a stacked deck against us. But maybe what's gratifying is that with all of the media and all of the influence that the former Soviet Union had, people came to a realization that there was what Pravda was not the truth. And I look for, and I'm gratified how the news is being spread throughout the world, whether it's in New Zealand or Australia or South Africa or in South America. So I thank you for your work and being able to go and.
Well, we're almost neighbors. I'm actually in California. We've got about 5 minutes left in this Zoom. Helen, welcome from Southeast London. If you have anything you want to say, please do. Everybody else, the floor is open for anyone. The Zoom is only 40 minutes. It'll be over in about 5 minutes, and I'll be back at the top of the hour. We got 2 more Zooms today. But if anybody else has anything that they care to say, now would be a great time.
I would just like to quickly say thanks to Nicholas and also to the last speaker for slightly putting my mind at rest a little bit and giving me some positivity. There's other factors that I think people have this huge cognitive dissonance, and that was reflected in what Danny Kruger said, that they want to believe that the government is good and protects them. They want to believe that the NHS is good. Everywhere I go in the shops, I see these cameras, if you go to the checkouts, and they're watching me. And people are brushing it inside and saying it's just for shoplifters. So we've got to a state where we're beyond what was happening in Russia in the 1970s and 80s. And yet people just don't want to see it. And it really, really terrifies me. But I am clinging on to that hope. So thanks, Nicholas and the others. And thanks for your work as well.
Anyone else? Felicity, just unmute yourself, please.
You're muted, Felicity, you're muted.
Still muted. There you go. There you go.
Well, firstly, thank you for all you do. I listen to your emails. I did come in on at 6 o'clock and heard that. My thing has been, what could we do? So thank you for saying this evening, about raising awareness. I write to politicians, I did sign the petition, etc. This evening, Dr. John Campbell on YouTube in the UK highlighted 3 of the politicians from the debate yesterday. And I think it'll be interesting if people watch Dr. John Campbell and see how he takes it forward. He hasn't made any comment. He's just shown the 3 particular politicians. So I'm hoping he's going to develop it and maybe give us more idea of what we can do.
One of my concerns has been that is exactly what I expect to happen. And that is exactly the problem. It's what was not said in these. Now, somebody mentioned that, there was a 2-hour quote unquote debate. It was scheduled for 3 hours.
Yeah.
There was an hour of information that coulda, woulda, shoulda been presented and was not. And I am trying to get in touch with John Campbell. I've been on his show a couple of times. I've submitted all of this information to the people involved, and they have not spoken about these things. And I find that to be very distressing and disturbing. I'm aware that nice speeches were made and important points were brought up by the various people who were there. That's a decoy. That's speculation about what might be coming. They coulda, shoulda, woulda said, pardon me, Health Minister, the deadline for the final version is January 27th. We demand that we see that immediately upon its submission. Oh, wait a minute. The working group is plotting to ignore that rule. Nobody said a word about that. Nobody said a word about the fact that the representative from the petition committee was the person who opened the discussions. And she said very clearly, we're not going to have any vote.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, that's what this discussion was supposed to be about. Oh, wait a minute. Nobody was there from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office to explain why nobody ever gave Parliament 21 days to consider this and vote to potentially reject it. And nobody mentioned, hey, you realize that the WHO committed blatant fraud and never actually even voted on the amendments? Well, 116,000 UK residents and citizens said, hey, we want to have a discussion and we want to see a vote. And it didn't happen. People need to talk about what didn't happen yesterday, not just regurgitate these fancy words about what might happen in the future. So this one is almost over. Thank you, everybody.